All right, good afternoon. Michael Waters. I'm the pastor of the Abundant Life AME Church in Dallas, Texas, and I'm really delighted to be a part of this Rethinking Church virtual summit. Our session is to talk about ministering to Black boys and Black men amidst social justice challenges. That's quite a title, and I hope we can dive into it together. Let's start off with a word of prayer. Eternal God, we give you praise, glory, and honor for you have created this space where we can dialogue together, encourage each other, and grow more useful for your kingdom. God, we pray that you would focus our efforts now, that you would be present with us, that wherever we are, your presence will be manifest, and that together we will learn and grow. God, we give you glory, we give you honor, we give you praise even now, for you are worthy of all glory and of all honor and of all praise. Is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, praise the Lord. I'm going to attempt to show my screen to you now. You should be able to see it. My understanding is that we won't be able to see each other until such time as I am finished with the visual presentation. But afterwards, I'll come down and we'll be able to chat together as well. So let me share my screen with you. All right. And again, we're talking about ministering to Black men and boys amidst social justice challenges. I want to begin with a song that I know many of you have heard and seen in the last several weeks, particularly following the death of George Floyd, a young brother who recorded the song. I believe that his mother composed initially, and it went viral. You've seen it everywhere, the BET Music Awards, other places. And I want to start off with that song now to center our conversation together.
I'm a young Black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hard to this prey. My people don't want no trouble. We got enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
For me, that's such a haunting song. I mean, a very clear declaration of our desire to live amid all of the atrocities and brutalities that we often face. Let's deal with the facts initially, to talk about what are the things that are impacting the life of Black men and boys, particularly in America today. We can testify that there are numerous death-dealing statistics relating to our lives as Black men and boys. Many of these you may already be aware of. Others of these might be new for you, but let's deal a little bit with the facts. Black men and boys comprise only 6% of America's total population. There are approximately 20 million Black men and boys out of a national population of just under 330 million people. 3% of America's total population are Black men over the age of 18. So when you think of us statistically here in this nation, we comprise a very small percentage of all Americans, particularly Black men. Only 3% of all persons in America are Black men over the age of 18. But even though that is the case, when we have a conversation about police brutality, we see an overrepresentation. We see a disparity as it relates to our deaths at the hands of police officers. There was a report recently by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, came out in August of 2019. And of this 20 million Black men and boys, about 1 in 1,000 Black men and boys in America can expect to die at the hands of police. Some 20,000 Black men and boys. Black men and black boys are 2.5 times more likely than white men and white boys to die during an encounter with police. We die so frequently, that is, black men and black boys, at the hands of police, that it is the 7th leading cause of death for black men ages 25 to 29. Imagine that. Death as a result of police use of force is a leading cause of death for black men and boys in America, particularly between the ages of 25 and 29 and 20 and 24. Black men in their 20s are particularly susceptible to dying at the hands of police, although we know well that there are boys, Tamir Rice, there are teenagers, Mike Brown, there are others, Eric Garner, George Floyd, who still die at the hand of police. And of course, because we're having a conversation of black men and boys, our focus is on black men and boys, but I don't want to suggest, even as we still are awaiting justice for Breonna Taylor, that this harm only comes to black men and black boys. We also experience heightened levels of violence because of racialized poverty violence. And we must talk about poverty as violence, particularly in the ways in which poverty has been enacted upon black people and black men and black boys for this presentation in particular. It is so daunting, this idea of racialized poverty violence, that the New York Times, in their April 20th, 2015 report, noted that there are 1.5 million missing black men. I'll say that again. There are 1.5 million missing black men. If you were to add the casualties, the fatalities from every war that America has ever participated in since its founding, it would be less than the 1.5 million missing black men in America today. And the 1.5 missing black men in America, New York Times article, are persons, black men, between the ages of 25 and 54. And that is particularly important because 25 to 54 are the years considered to be the most productive years in a man's life. So it's not just that we are missing black men in our community, we're missing them at a time in their lives where they historically have the most to contribute to their families, to our communities, and to our churches. Of course, these statistics are driven by incarceration and early death. When combined with the total percentage of black men over 18, about 10 million persons in America, that suggests that 15% of black men in America today are missing from public life. Indeed, that is a significant concern that we must wrestle with. As we continue to talk about the state of black men and black boys and the various things that encounter us as black men and boys in America today, we also must acknowledge that according to the Sentencing Project, as a part of that missing black men and black boys, 1/3 of black men in America have a felony conviction. And we can go on with a litany of other issues. Although black people account for just 13% of the US population, 42% of the 37,832 new HIV diagnoses in the United States of America in 2018 were of black people. Let me say that again. Although black people account for just 13% of the US population, in 2018, 42% of the 37,832 new HIV diagnoses in the United States were of black people. And of those 42%, 31% were among black men. So as it relates to another virus, the HIV virus, we are still overrepresented amongst those who are affected. When you deal with higher education, only 19% of black men aged 25 and older have earned a bachelor's degree or higher. In an age and a time of automation, and particularly during this time of pandemic, when many of the jobs that might be accessible to persons without a degree will likely not be accessible to them in years to come. Only 33% of black men earn more than $50,000 a year. And the expectancy rate in terms of life expectancy for black men is the lowest, 72.2 years, although there are persons across America, there are places across America, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., and New York, where the numbers are much lower. Right? Now, we also have to say something about respectability politics. You know, there's this notion that if, in fact, you do achieve greatly in America, if you do earn a degree, if you are able to get a good paying job, that regardless of your race, regardless of your background, you're an American dream. Frequently, we find that not to be the case in the Black American experience. Particularly for Black men, there is a correlation between high achievement, or what our nation would consider to be high achievement, and depression. There's in fact a new study that literally came out yesterday. I'll give you the title now. It's entitled "Black Men Face," or at least the article in which the study is a part of. Black men face high discrimination and depression, even as their education and income rise. Black men face high discrimination and depression, even as their education, even as their income rises. As a matter of fact, there's a study from the National Survey of American Life where it was found that Black boys from the wealthiest Black families in America are the most likely to be depressed. So achievement alone, whether it be through education or whether it be through some level of personal wealth, has not proven enough to shield Black people, Black men, Black boys from the impacts of discrimination and racial hatred in our nation. And let's take a little closer look at Black boys in particular. Our young Black boys. Black children represent about 18% of all children in preschool programs in schools, but they make up half of the preschoolers who are suspended. So very early in life, our young Black children and young Black boys have a target on them, that so-called school to prison pipeline that so many of us are aware of, that begins where even at a young age, there's a criminality associated with Black youth and Black adolescents that follows them even on their way to adulthood. The greater issue behind this is the issue that was reported a few years ago by the American Psychological Association as relates to adultification. It's something that happens to both Black boys and Black girls, but as it relates to Black boys, it's been researched and discovered that Black boys as young as 10, quote unquote, may not be viewed in the same light of childhood innocence as their white peers, but are instead more likely to be mistaken as older, to be perceived and face police violence if accused from a crime. As a matter of fact, upwards to 4.5 years are added on top of their actual ages. So when young people encounter teachers and the public and even police, a 10-year-old is viewed as a 14-year-old. A 14-year-old is viewed as an 18-year-old. A 16-year-old is viewed as a 20-year-old. And they are perceived to be guilty of any crime that has been alleged to them. And of course, all of this happens under the death-dealing reality of white supremacy, which has been and remains our greatest global pandemic. The coronavirus and COVID-19 has only served to further expose the extreme racial disparities that we face in this nation. But let us be very clear that the greatest threat against life, and Black life in particular, is white supremacy. Let's also name the fact that in 2018, there were more racialized acts of violence in America than at any other point in American history. Let us also acknowledge that today, there are more hate groups active in America than at any other point in American history. In the state in which I live, the state of Texas, boasts 10% of all active hate groups in America. Everything that we have referenced, everything that we've talked about so far, I believe falls under the jurisdiction of social justice, issues that are related to social justice. Doesn't matter whether it's fighting against the adultification of our preschoolers. It doesn't matter whether it is we're dealing with mass incarceration in the criminal justice system. Doesn't matter if we're dealing with HIV/AIDS, and in actuality, on the broader scope, dealing with accessibility to healthcare. Doesn't matter if we're dealing with racialized poverty. All of those things, frankly, are symptoms of the wider issue of white supremacy and the historic and contemporary harm it continues to bring our communities. So let's now shift to a conversation concerning our response. As we are seeking to minister to Black boys and Black men amidst social justice challenges, and I want to go on record as suggesting that we have always been amid social justice challenges in this nation. This is not a new reality. This has been our historic experience since our forebears first arrived on these shores in 1619. We have continuously been harmed by white supremacy, continuously harmed by white terrorism, continuously harmed by public policies that have ensnarled Black, brown, and indigenous bodies. That has been our historic reality. We have always had to minister to the Black diaspora, and in particular for our time together, Black men and boys amid social justice challenges. That's not new, all right? So we have to then ask ourselves, what should be our response? What has been our response? What must we do in order to counter the impact of these death-dealing realities? Well, I just have a few suggestions, and then I'm very happy to enter into a conversation together concerning our response. So I believe our response, four things I want to suggest as it relates to our response to minister to Black men and boys amidst social justice challenges, is that we must go about the work of creating safe spaces. I put with the asterisk there, in person. We look forward to the day, and I do believe it is coming. God will grant us the opportunity to gather in person together. But even in this time of social distancing and physical distancing, we can still create safe spaces for Black men and Black boys virtually. In addition to that, I think our response should move us in the way of referrals and resources, that we have a responsibility of directing Black men and boys to opportunities that might help and assist them in the midst of these social justice challenges. I also want to suggest that advocacy and direct action have been and should continue to be our responsibility in the midst of these challenges. And then also, we must go about the work of creating resources as a response to the challenges that we face. So I want to share a few of the things that we've been able to do as a part of our ministry, Abundant Life AME Church in Dallas, Texas, and some of the things that I have been able to be engaged in further as a pastor, as we have attempted to be faithful to respond to the needs of Black men and boys at this time. This is a Zoom presentation that I was a part of, a dialogue. I didn't particularly love the title, but I didn't come up with it, but it was a powerful forum. I was able to participate along activists, business leaders, politicians. On this panel was a young brother, teenager, who's experiencing this in a very unique way, all the way to a chaplain for the Chicago Bears, who's also a Harvard-trained business person and minister. And we had just a very honest conversation about how all the things that were encircling us around this time of the year, which was just in May 24th, how all of the things that we were being bombarded with at the time, you can imagine all the things that were happening at the time, how they impacted us. And as you see, based on the date of this video, I believe this was actually before George Floyd was killed. So we were already talking about the impacts of Ahmaud Arbery and of the coronavirus and of racialized communities of poverty and all the issues that are there. And it was a safe space that was created for us to have this very open and transparent dialogue. It does not necessarily have to happen in terms of some type of public program. This is something that you can do if you're in pastoral leadership or in leadership within congregation or community, just to set aside time and space online, by phone, you name it, where Black men can come together and they can be honest and transparent with one another concerning what is happening. An opportunity for community building. Some of the other things that we've done obviously before this time of the coronavirus, but we'd have a barbershop ministry where the young men would go, our brothers would go to a barbershop. We wouldn't do it at the church, go to a barbershop. They bring food, had a wonderful friend and brother who had a barbershop who would open it up to us after hours. This opportunity for us to watch the game. And at halftime, we'd have a time of sharing, of prayer, of dialogue, and then go back to our fellowship. That created a safe space, and that was a blessed opportunity. Some things more historic that you're well aware of, men's breakfast, also an opportunity for men in the church to mentor and support younger men in the church. These are some of the things that can be done to create safe spaces and community building for Black men, which is in fact one way to counter the death-dealing realities that we face in this nation. In addition to that, the issue of, or the opportunity for making referrals and to providing resources. So the picture before you is a picture of what is called the Second Chance Community Improvement Program. The Second Chance Community Improvement Program, otherwise known as SKIP, is a program that was founded by my wife. She's on the right side of your screen, attorney Ulysses Rees-Waters. She founded the first ever alternative to incarceration for emerging adults in the state of Texas's history. Very proud of her tremendous work. This court has won national awards, and it is a part of the first ever, the largest scale RTC clinical trial in the courts ever undertaken in American history. Among the partners they have is Harvard University, Texas, University of Texas, Texas A&M, and others who've come alongside to study how to change, how to shift the criminal justice system in such a way that it liberates particularly the emerging adults in our community. I list or present this picture in particular because what this court does, which is comprehensive, and if you want to find more information, go online and look up the Lone Star Justice Alliance. She's currently the deputy director of the Lone Star Justice Alliance. Ultimately, young adults between the ages of 17 and 24 and then upwards to 30 go through this program. They're persons who have begun to have challenges with the criminal justice system through wraparound services and an entire menu of programs that are offered to young people. At the end of the program, their records are completely expunged. That's why it's a second chance program. They don't have a record. They have a job. Many of them are enrolled in college. So it is a way of ending, of shutting off that prison pipeline and returning the genius of our young adults to our community. The young man here with the certificate is actually a member of my congregation. So it's not simply something that was offered to the community at large, but there have actually been men, young men within our congregation or connected to families in our congregation who've gone through the program, as well as young women, and have gotten a second chance on life. I had the honor of opening the U.S. House of Representatives in prayer a few years ago. This was before I combined churches with another church to form the Abundant Life Church. But as a part of this program, we were able to take young men from our community, some who had never been outside of Dallas, all the way to Washington, D.C., to provide them with that experience, provide resources when they were able to meet elected officials, walk through the halls of Congress, the Supreme Court, other spaces and places in D.C. to widen their view of the possibilities within this nation, the ways in which they can have impact, which I think is an important resource and opportunity for young men, young boys, is to provide them opportunities for travel, opportunities to gain awareness of the world around them. In some of our communities, young Black boys never venture very far from the community. And so this could be a life-changing experience. Also, we're doing work, as I know a number of you are doing, as it relates to COVID-19. We started through our ministry partnerships an emergency relief fund where we've been providing micro grants for our community and members who have been impacted by COVID or the strains that have been caused by COVID financially. We've also partnered with Mass for the People in doing work of distributing free PPE to our community. That's what you see happening now. That's one of our distribution days where we gave out free masks, gave out free sanitizer, gave out food to those who came by. We're getting ready to add a voter registration dynamic to this time as well. You see our church volunteers. They are masked. They have shields on. They're socially distanced because, of course, we want to make sure that we are protecting those who are serving our community in need. But that's another way in which we can provide resources, particularly Black men, many of which are essential workers. There were a number of persons who stopped by who are still working. And we know essential workers are the highest numbers of those who are being infected. And this is one way we can support. I've not even got into the supports of mental health referrals or other things that we can do and have done to uplift Black men and Black boys. Let me move on, because I definitely want to provide an opportunity for us to ask questions and to be in dialogue with each other. Another thing we must do relates to advocacy and direct social action, impacting policy. I'm going to show this video that actually features me. I'm going to try to shut it off before it gets to a part where a certain word is said. But I think this is the one. I'm looking at it. Make sure this is the right one. It doesn't look like this is the right one. I'm going to click on it nonetheless just to see. Make sure it gave me the right one. Nope, it's not the right one. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Down here somewhere. Okay, I might have to share it at another time. It looks like the wrong video attached. But some of you may have seen this before, but I've actually been on a viral video. Let me see if I can find it just really quickly here, since we're together. It won't take me long, I don't think. Let's see here. I believe you can still see my screen. I was a part of a viral video a few years ago that keeps cycling back about me engaging with a member of the Confederacy and other members of the Klan while we were fighting to bring down Confederate monuments in the city of Dallas. Let me see if I can get this to work.
Why his great-grandfather fought. It is hard to know the motivations.
I'm going to try to advance it a little bit to where our part is. Some of you may have seen this before. Others of you may not. Here it is. Here we go.
News clip.
Why do you carry that flag? Because this is my heritage. My family fought to save their farm under this flag. Who was working that farm?
That is a good, tough question. And the news clip actually cut out there, but we were so intrigued to find out what his response was. We tracked it down. And whatever you are expecting, you're going to be surprised.
Who was working that farm? My family. Who was working the farm? They were poor. Do you know how much a slave cost back then?
Some of you may have seen that video before. It went viral again just a few weeks ago after I think it was D.L. Hughley shared it this time, but it's gone viral a few times. I really wanted to uplift that because a part of our work in terms of ministering to Black men and Black boys means that we must directly engage the systems and structures that harm Black men and Black boys. And again, the greatest system and structure that cause harm is white supremacy. And in this particular struggle, we were fighting against monuments to white supremacy, which we believe continue to be the hallmark, the visual hallmark of white supremacy reigning over spaces within our nation. I'm happy to say that in the midst of that struggle, over time, that began in 2017, our latest struggle, that as of last month, by the grace of God, through our work, advocacy, protest, direct action, the final standing monument to white supremacy in Dallas that had been erected since 1896 was finally brought down. There have been other things that we've been able to do as it relates to direct action, as it relates to policy. This is our empowerment center in Dallas. And if you'll see the woman that is standing to the right of me, I'm at the podium. That is Allison John, the mother of both and John. Some of you remember that case in Dallas, a young man eating ice cream in his own home who was shot to death by Amber Geiger, former officer in Dallas. We advocated tremendously to try to bring Ms. Geiger to justice. It looked like the scales of justice would not be tilted in our favor. And to be honest with you, even though she was convicted, there's still more that we desired. But Dallas has a very nasty history of police brutality that's not necessarily known of Dallas, beyond Dallas. And that's been an area that we have fought for and fought to bring about justice. So we, by the grace of God, last year, were able to bring about the overhaul of the Community Police Oversight Board. We have a monitor for the police now. And there are other things that we're doing to try to protect the life of Black people, in particular for this presentation, Black men within our community. There we are standing together at the press conference, final press conference with them at our Empowerment Center, addressing the media about additional work that we're doing. I'm standing alongside fellow activists, members of my congregation, ministers of my congregation, and others. We're standing up for justice along with the John family. Some of the other things that we have been able to do as it relates to advocacy, I've talked about our work with the Confederate monuments, the North Texans for Historical Justice to get those monuments removed. Talked about our work in terms of police brutality. And currently I'm serving, matter of fact, when I get off with you in a few moments, I'll have to change over to a work group that I'm a part of with the county. We're meeting with city managers that are part of Dallas County. We're working on the issue of defunding the police. And I and a group of activists issued 10 demands that are being addressed now. And so I'd ask for you to pray for us in that work as we're seeking to bring greater justice to our city. Some other things that we've done, we were able, by the grace of God, to get 300,000 of our residents earned paid sick leave. We did not have that in the city of Dallas, which is important because we lead the nation in terms of the most uninsured workforce. All of these things are things that impact Black life and Black men. And it's a part of our extended efforts as a church to address the issues and challenges that we face. I'm part of the Dallas Black Clergy for Safety, Equity, and Justice. I'm a founding member along with Dr. Freddie Haynes and a few others. There are 10 of us who stand together, Dr. Marcus King, Dr. Irie Session, Pastor Fia Kennedy, several others who are part of this work from different Black faith traditions, Black Christian faith traditions, who are standing side by side in this work. And then I formerly was the co-chair of Faith Forward Dallas, 300-member organization of pastors, imams, rabbis, and others who are committed to acts of justice. So this is a part of our work. And so we must be engaged in the struggle and the fight, not just to talk about it, but to prayerfully be at the table and to be in the streets to bring about greater change. Okay. And then finally, I want to deal with the issue of creating resources. I believe in the genius of our people. There's much that we have. And there are some things, some subject matters speak to that we can inform. These are just a few books that I have been blessed to either author or contribute to in the last 3 years. You have Good White Racists, Confronting Your Role in Racial Injustice. That's doing fairly well now for author Kerry Connolly. I wrote the foreword to that, a way in which of confronting white people in their role in racism, particularly those who perceive themselves to be moderate, maybe even liberal, to understand that they have been impacted by and sometimes are complicit in the continuation of white supremacy. When kids ask hard questions, faith-filled responses for tough topics, I have a chapter in there concerning how to talk to kids about racial discrimination. My wife has a chapter in there about the adultification of Black girls. My first book, Freestyle, Reflections on Faith, Family, Justice, and Pop Culture, which won 2 national awards, USA Best Book Awards in Social Action and in Christianity, as well as an Illumination Book Award for exemplary Christian writing, kind of deep dive into racial politics of America through a hip hop lens. The follow up to that book, entitled Stakes is High, Race, Faith, and Hope for America, which won the National Wilbur Award in Nonfiction in 2018, an award that's been given out since 1949. Other Wilbur Award winners include Oprah Winfrey, Morgan Freeman, New York Times, others. So I'm very honored to be a part of being recognized alongside them. Another book I wrote forward to for such a time as this, Hope and Forgiveness After the Charleston Massacre. Reverend Sharon Risher is a national advocate against racial violence and for gun reform. Her mother, Ethel Lance, was shot 8 times, point blank range in one of our churches, Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. I was actually with her in Manhattan when that book appeared on the Today Show and MSNBC last year. And that's doing well. And then Preaching As Resistance, I have a sermon in there and a few other places and spaces, articles and others that I've been able to contribute to. I believe that this is also a part of our ministry of creating resources that can form and shape and empower Black men in our community. I've also started a class entitled Makes Me Want to Holler, Race in America. I'm currently doing a 9-week study with the mega church in Louisiana. And I have several other churches that are lined up to engage this all the way through February, where they're inviting their congregation to study with me as we take deep dives into racial history as a way of cultivating anti-racists. And so this is another way in which we can impact the lives of our Black men and Black boys through community education efforts, letting people know of the systems that are there, and then encouraging and empowering persons to become anti-racist. And then here, I'm very grateful to say that my first children's book will be coming out in September, a book entitled For Beautiful Black Boys Who Believe in a Better World, based on our family's story of dealing with police brutality, issues of racialized violence, issues of gun violence. It's a story written through the eyes of my son, Jeremiah. He is a protagonist in this book. Again, there are very few resources available that actually speak to this issue. It comes out in September officially. Pre-orders are available now. We weren't even really supposed to be pushing or marketing the book until about this time. But given what's happening in the nation around Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, people began finding the book immediately. And for several weeks at the end of March into June, the book was the number 3 selling book, new children's book in America on Amazon. It was the number 1 book for books dealing with children and violence for about 3.5 weeks. Currently, it's still in the top 100. I think it's in top 20 still online. But we will officially have it come out in September, have some wonderful endorsements online and persons who are supporting the effort. But in addition to that, there is a free online discussion guide and activity guide, as well as a free downloadable online coloring sheet that we made available early. So many people were reaching out to the source by which we can uplift our young people at this critical time. And though the book was not out, we wanted to make sure that we could get them whatever we did have available to help in the conversations that they're having. I'll be speaking to a school tomorrow, in fact, a copy of the book for each one of their young boys. It's all boys school, 420 boys are part of the school. They ordered a book for each of their young people and teachers. And we'll have a dialogue with parents tomorrow, a parent workshop to kind of help them in terms of how to empower Black boys at this time. So moving on quickly, one last portion, and then we will be able to talk. And please go ahead and write whatever questions you might have, any comments, any concerns in the chat now. So when we transition over, we'll be ready to jump right to them. But I want to finally end with this question, rethink or reclaim. rethink or reclaim. I know that this conference is about rethinking church, but I want to pose the idea that not only are we in the process of rethinking church, but maybe we're in the process of reclaiming church. When we talk about creating space, this has actually been a part of our history for a long time. The hush harbors, the places that were created for our forebears to find a place of hope and encouragement and connection with their God. This has been a part of our history. So when we talk about our call to create safe spaces and provide community building, we talk about direct action. You know, sometimes the hush harbors also provided entry into the Underground Railroad. That's a part of our history. And maybe our call is to reclaim that history at this time. This is our church, a portion of our church, Abundant Life, AME Church in Dallas during worship. And, you know, that's been the space that we've created. We've created opportunities for Black men and boys safe and to be encouraged and to be supported, places where they can lament the issues that are coming against them, places where they can receive the referrals and the resource, a place that is rooted in direct action. That's the only reason the Black church exists, is the direct response to white supremacy in our world, and also the ability to create resources for those who are in need. And there's some very important things that are happening. This just came out, a new report from the Pew Center talking about how faith has been strengthened during the coronavirus pandemic. And you see, for historically Black people, 56%, more than any other of the groups that are represented here, say that their faith has been strengthened during the coronavirus. And that's not surprising to me, because as a church, we are well accustomed to ministering in the seasons of crisis and challenge and providing uplift for our communities as we go through those challenges. So even now, when we are virtual in our worship experience, we're still creating opportunities for the ministry of God to go forth, for lives to be changed, and particularly for us to reach to the needs of Black men and Black boys. I love talk with you. And if you want to continue to connect with me, we can do so online at michaelwwaters.com. I'm happy to receive any information, any contacts that you would like to engage in. But that is my presentation. I'm back with you now. Let's talk. I'm going to scroll up here, and please add your questions or comments to the chat. Oh, I see a lot of friends here. Hey, y'all. Thank y'all for joining us, including one of my best men in my wedding, Pastor Dr. Willie Golston's in the house. Good to see you, brother. Thank you for being here. I see one question. How do you get men, boys to church and keep them engaged? That is a wonderful question. And I'll be honest with you, we've had to be creative in our approach. There are a number of men in our community who actually work on Sundays. I have a number of men, and we're blessed. I will say we're blessed as a congregation to have a strong representation of men, particularly young men in worship. Our church, which I founded at the end of 2008, 2009, still to this day, when you look at our adult population, over 75% of our adult population is under the age of 50. So we're very unique in that regard. We have young men, young women who are part of our leadership and pastoral staff, part of our lay leadership, part of the congregation at large. But I do have some young men who are working jobs, like in warehouses, other places, where if they get to church, oftentimes it's without sleep. And I've had a number of them have made their sacrifices, come straight to church and then go home. So you have to create other opportunities. Okay. And I think that's the main thing. You gotta find a way, whether that be through Zoom, whether that be through a phone call, or whether that be meeting at other hours beyond Sunday morning. I think that's important to view the work of the church. Like, so much time and energy historically has been put on Sunday morning as a primary ministering time, when there are all type of opportunities that we are particularly well aware of now during this pandemic, that we can connect with boys and with men, and then doing the things that they like to do. We have taken young men, obviously before the pandemic, to the football game. We took some young men and young ladies to a football game recently, just to hang out. I mean, nothing big, just to enjoy a time of fellowship at a college game. We've gone to the movies, just an opportunity of creating community. But also we've had men who have gone to support our young men in their athletics and their other pursuits. Got ministers and young and brothers in our church who are part of the Boy Scouts and who lead groups in that way. So that has happened in an official and even unofficial capacity, the way we support a young men. And our young men have done a tremendous job despite the challenges. I have a young brother in our church right now who's a starter for OU for the Sooners, a young man who's going to UT where he's going to play now. Got another young man who just graduated on his way to law school. And these are young men who grew up in poverty. These are not young men who grew up in the suburbs, silver spoon, all of this kind of stuff. These are young men who have had to fight, have had to struggle, have needed support, and yet God has blessed them, I would like to say, through the support and work of our church to keep them going. Another question. Many brothers I speak with have no interest in our current church model, may have problems with the pastor. That's absolutely true. I think that sometimes men feel emasculated, if you will, in our worship settings. That's just my opinion. I think that sometimes they thought that it wasn't a space where they could be men, but sometimes that's because of toxic masculinity. Sometimes that's because of the ways in which they've been formed, and there's an opportunity for healing to happen there, where they think that exuberant worship is something that only women do. And when they come to the recognition that men can also get in contact with God, that there's nothing wrong with lifting up hands, praying, crying in the presence of God, crying out in the presence of God. And gratefully, that's something that we've been able to do. I'm a very expressive person in worship. I love connecting with the Spirit of God. And I think when you see that modeled in your pastoral leadership, particularly for Black men, they are disarmed. They become more comfortable doing it. Then you got to do some things that are out of the box. For instance, one of the things that we've done for years is have a relationship between the church and hip hop. My dissertation, in fact, really engaged the role of hip hop and hip hop theology as it relates to the Black church and the future of the church. And so we have for years, believe it or not, we've had a DJ as a part of our worship experience. And we still have one. I travel with the DJ sometimes for some of my presentations, and they're spinning and doing all kinds of things. And that's a way of drawing persons in. The way in which you approach the preaching moment, how you engage culture, how you engage hip hop, how you engage the things that impact that community is a way of drawing them in. So there are other things that can be shifted in the model, but I think it's about, re-envisioning what worship looks like, re-envisioning what community looks like, or what the opportunities are that are available. I know I'm almost out of time. I might be out of time right now, but let me get this one question. Okay, well, that's actually a comment. Yes, you got to do the things that that young people like to do, right? We were blessed to receive a grant from the Perkins School of Theology last year to really impact our teenagers and really to build out a program with them. And most of what we did, to be honest with you, was to listen to them. Imagine that. I think one of the things that we fail sometimes, and speaking generally here as a church, is we try to put a program in place as opposed to allowing the people who are impacted to help shape the programs that will draw them in. And so amazingly, the things that they're drawn to are the things that they created, right? And that's a model that we're attempting to continue on. Our teenagers participated, and this was on their own accord. This is not something that we did as a church at large, telling them what to do. Our Black teenagers, largely Black teenagers, came to us and they said, we want to be a part of the Black receipt movement. And they did. And so we were all sending in our receipts to show our support for Black businesses at this time. But that idea of participation actually originated with our teenagers. And we're very grateful for their leadership. What are the ways that we can build trust with the men of our church, particularly for the men who do not attend the church, but for our men to collectively be the role model for to make sure I'm reading that correctly? What are the ways that we can build trust with the men of our church, particularly for the men who do not attend the church, but for our men to collectively be the role model for our young men? Okay, I think I understand the question. So a good number of the men in our church, and I don't necessarily like the term but I'll use it just because it's accessible to me now. But we have a lot of men in our church who are either unchurched or who have recently returned to the church. We have a number of men in our church, as you can imagine, who have been formerly incarcerated or recently released, right? I think the thing that draws men to our church, and there's no magic sauce to it. It's just about being real. You know, that idea that real recognizes real. That's it. You know, I think most people know what's real. They know what's authentic. They know what's conjured up and what's fake. But they also know, you know, when the true heart is there for them, where they're really valued, where people love them, where they're not judged. And frankly, that's been our experience. Come on in. You know, we don't have a dress code. You know, if you want to come in and we're not going to turn you around. You'll see on a Sunday morning, you know, as we were gathering for worship, it was nothing to see, you know, a brother who may be suited up alongside a brother who may be wearing a jersey. I mean, that's fine, because it's about getting in contact with God. And so we've not provided all of those unnecessary barriers to participation. And I think that has been a way of building trust, where men knew they could just be real, just be themselves, come and experience God. And what I found personally is that there are men who are looking to make an impact. I mean, they're really looking to make a major impact in their community and in their church. And they don't know how to begin that process. And so you create opportunities by which they can give. So I've had men who've come to me and said, Pastor, I want to organize. I remember one young brother said, I want to organize a shoe giveaway for young brothers in the high schools. And basically what he was saying, and this is, I mean, it may seem like a small concern to someone else, but basically he was saying there's some young men in our community, you know, we all know this. We know that there's a hierarchy in high school about shoes and what kind of shoes you have and don't have. And that could impact, not saying that it should, but some kind can impact some of our young people if they can't afford certain shoes. He got together with some brothers and they began to bring back some of their very rarely worn shoes, or even some brand new shoes that they put up somewhere. I'm talking about Jordans and other kind of shoes. And they just gave it away to these young men in high school. And, you know, you would have thought that they'd been, I mean, it was a blessing to them. And I never would have thought of that idea. But again, one of the young brothers in our church came up with that idea, which is also a word to say about pastoral leadership, which is that every good idea doesn't have to originate with you, right? You have to create a space where the genius of the people you serve also has room to breathe and grow. And so, frankly, oftentimes, some of the questions you're asking here, oftentimes it's somebody who will come to me and say, Pastor, I got an idea. I say, you know what, bring me a plan. Let's work on it. Any other questions? I think I'm at time. I thank you. I'd love to stay connected with you. I'm going to type in my website again here. If you'd like to remain connected, there's a way for you to send an email to me or connect with me on social media. I want to thank you, Reverend Womack, for creating this time and this space that has been a blessing. I pray that you've been blessed today by what I've been able to share. And feel free to add any other items to this or reach out to me if you have any additional ideas. Scrolling up one last time to make sure I didn't miss anything that anyone particularly wrote. All right. Well, again, thank you for the opportunity. God bless you. Praying for you. Let's continue to go forth in the peace and power of God.